even if it's not related. Yes.
I'm going to count it down and you can start. 3, 2, 1, go.
Hi there, everyone. Welcome to STEM Lockdown Digital School. I am Lalani Lagranse, your presenter for Grade 12 IT today. So as promised, we're going to look at the supplementary paper of, oh goodness, it's a supplementary paper of last year, actually. We're not going to look, sorry, this must be my wrong presentation today. It's actually oh, yeah, no, I definitely have the wrong one here for you guys. Doesn't really matter. We are going to look at question 1 of the February-March paper of 2018. So this is a little bit longer than usual because this paper only consisted of 3 questions. At the end of this year, you can expect 4 questions, and question 1 will count 40 marks, whereas this question is now counting 52. So I'm just reading Shawns' question here. He wants to know if there's a way to overwrite information in text file. Yes, Shawn, there is. I can show you guys later how to do that. So the first question, just a few things. If you see the word extract the values entered by the user, that means that you need to get input from the user and that there's possibly marks there for the input. Now, very important, before you start declaring these variables, is have a look at the example of input and output. The example here is real variables. So you also have to declare real variables. And obviously, we're going to use string to float to get the input there. And then we are required to calculate the surface area of the circle as well as for the triangles. And you are supposed to then calculate what the total surface area is of this picture provided. And they give you the formula here for the circle, even though I think you all know it from primary school. And then also they've given you how to calculate the surface area of a triangle, which would be just one of these. So you have to remember that you have to multiply that by 8 to get all of them. So the display area is not just for the circle, but also for the 8 triangles and then the total. So we need to keep them all in separate variables. Before I continue there, I just want you to take note here. Here they actually used float to string and not float to string F, but I have used float to string F. We usually go at the end, the last 2 arguments of our float to string F is comma 10, comma 2, or comma 10, comma, in this case, 9. But that won't work because the 10 that we use, so the second last argument of string to float, that is the number of digits that you can display, including your decimal point. And in here, there's 13, if you count the decimal point as well, and there's 9 decimal places showing. So I have done the memo this way to show you guys how I would use float to string displaying that. Shawn is asking, this question came out in a grade 11 final exam last year. Well, your teacher obviously used it, so that this was a February-March 2018 supplementary paper. Okay, so here is the memo. We have the input there for 3 real variables using string to float and getting input from our different edit boxes. Just make sure that you don't create one of those silly mistakes where you use the wrong edit box for the wrong variable. Also, they have in this question, they have given us the radius, but remember they could maybe give you the diameter, in which instance you would have to divide it by 2 to get hold of the radius to calculate surface area and circumference of a circle. And then I'm just applying the formulas using pi. Remember pi, the function, it has a value very close to the real value of pi, but the real value of pi, remember, has an infinite number of decimal places. and our computers can't work with infinite numbers. So for that reason, it is a little out. And then we have to square the radius. Don't forget about your square function. And then for the surface area of the triangle, this is the formula there, half of the base times the height. And remember to multiply that by 8 because there were 8 triangles. And then you also needed the total area. So that means taking the circle plus the triangle. So fairly simple. And then we display here, this is where I wanted to show you guys my floater string F. This was the value that I was talking about. There was 13 digits needed. I just made it a little bit more. And then 9 decimal places to show. So here is the total area for the triangles, and then just the display. Very important is that you are displaying 2 decimal points here, as the question also asks you to do that. So the next question here is, and this question paper actually has quite a few loops in it. So I think from here onwards, we're going to use a loop in every one of our questions. So very good practice for looping. This first question is asking us to calculate the next blue moon. They say the first blue moon was seen, or probably should have said recorded, doesn't really matter. But the first blue moon was in 1862. This value was now displayed in a label for you, and you had to get hold of that value that we'll look at just now. And every 3rd year, there is a blue moon. And you had to calculate when will the next one be after this year. So if you run this program still this year, I know some of the grade 11s joined us and grade 10s joined as well today. But if you are running this program this year, you will still get 2021 because that's the next blue moon after 2020. But if you would run this program next year, it will obviously be 2024 because it's excluding the year it is in at the moment. So I've used a loop here that I'll show you guys. And input from the user. Oh, let me just show you guys the screen quickly. Oh, now the F12 doesn't want to work. So if you have a look there at the label, that's the label with a colon. And then we have the year there. And I have to first extract the year and store that as an integer number, and then use that year, add 3 to it until I go past this year. So since we don't know how many times we have to loop, I'm going to use a repeat loop. So the first part here is just finding that colon and then copying out that string that I stored from the label's caption. Very strange paper, getting input from a label. But yeah, I'm now copying out from the value after the colon, and then for 4 characters, I'm copying out my year. And blue is now that first year that there was a blue moon. And from now on, I'm going to add 3 to this integer until this value here for the year is greater than today's year. So you can use current year, or you could also use year of date. But for that, you would have to add date utils to your uses. So this will now continue to loop until the blue moon here is after today's year. And then in the edit box here, very simply, we're just displaying the year as was required. So not very difficult, I think. So let's have a look at the next question. Now, in this question, it says the highest common factor needs to be determined of 2 numbers. And if you guys go to the exam guidelines of 2018 that I've been speaking about, you will see there that one of the bullets says that you have to be able to find the lowest common multiple as well as the highest common factor, and that the algorithms for these will not be provided for you. So make sure that you practice these because they will ask you that. So what we're doing here is getting the two numbers. I think you guys all know your maths. The highest common, to find the highest common factor is the number that can divide into both without a remainder. So if we have a look at the solution here, I have two solutions here. Sorry, I see there's a question. Would it be possible to use a while loop? Yes, Sean. And for the previous question, yes, you could have used a while loop. I just didn't create one now, but for the next questions, I created a repeat as well as a while loop for you so that you can see the difference, and it's up to you which one you want to use. So for conditional loops, so conditional loops are while loops and repeat loops. The correct way of picking the right loop is, if it's a conditional loop, so I don't know how many times it needs to execute, but I know that it needs to execute at least once, then it should be a repeat loop because the condition sits at the bottom. Whereas if I'm unsure if a loop should execute at all, I'll use a while loop because I'll first test before I start executing that loop. But we have up to now not marked that strictly. But if you follow those rules, it often helps you to find the best solution and also the shortest one. So I just want to give you guys an example here of using 6 and 12. And so we're getting input from the user for two numbers. I'm just using 6 and 12 to explain this line here to you guys. We can get to other examples just now. So what I'm doing is I'm finding the smallest number of the two. So the min function will find the smallest value of two integer values. And why I'm picking the smallest one is the highest common factor could possibly be the smallest number, as in the example here with 6 and 12, because 6 can divide into 6 and 6 can also divide into 12. It's not possible for the higher number to be the highest common factor because, well, obvious, because we can't, 12 can't go into 6. So it has to be the smallest one. So your starting point is the smaller one. And then I'm going to use a repeat loop. And the reason why I added one is I am decreasing that value every time. So this K here is at the end, it will be my highest common factor. So I am starting here, if I take the examples of 6 and 12, I am starting at 7 because I extract the minimum from those two values, which is 6 plus 1 is 7. And then the first time it loops, this will go down to 6. And in our example of 6 and 12, this condition here will be true and it will loop only once. So what I'm doing here in my conditions of my repeat loop is I'm going to continue to loop until both numbers can be divided by K. So that's my highest common factor. And then the remainder will be 0. So I have to test for inum1 and inum2 to test if that number can divide into both of them without a remainder. So by the end of this loop, then K will hold the value of the highest common factor. If you look at another example, let's say we had 6 and something like 13, which obviously the highest common factor there is 1. It will start at 6 and it will continue to loop until it hits 1, and then 1 will be displayed at the end. So this is now the repeat loop, but you can also do the same solution using a while loop. And I just want to go over the while rules again. So if we have a look at a while, the top line is still the same. You guys now understand why I'm starting there with +1. I have initialized a Boolean variable to set to false. And then I'm going to test in my while loop, while this Boolean variable is false, continue to do the following. And the moment that I find the K, I'm going to, at the moment that I find that I divide both numbers by K and the answer, there's no remainder, I'm going to change be found to true. I just now note that I have a this here is actually supposed to go up here. I forgot to change that because we first want to decrease the number and then we want to start dividing. And then we have to, at the end, k will also have the value of the highest common factor. Now, when you're using a while loop, what I want you to remember is ITC. I stands for initialize, T stands for test, and C stands for change. And what you need to do is you need to make sure that you initialize, test, and change the same variable. If you don't, you are either not going to loop at all, or you are going to fall into an infinite loop. So the same variable, you can see my variable that I'm initializing, testing, and changing is be found. I'm initializing it above the loop. I'm testing it inside of the while condition, and then I'm changing it on the inside of the while loop. And in that way, you can be sure that you will not fall into an infinite loop. Just if we look at a repeat loop here at the top, I don't always have to initialize this value. Sometimes the value gets a value on the inside of a repeat. So initializing is depending on the question. But what I do need to do is I always need to change that variable inside of the repeat loop. And that same variable I need to be testing inside of my until condition. So that is very important. So remember, initialize, test, change when you are using a while loop. So this question here asks us to remove vowels, which is fairly simple. I'm sure you guys have all done that before, but there is a little twist here. We are supposed to remove all the vowels except if the vowel is the first letter of a word. Now, in the previous lessons, we have found words and reversed them. And the way we found a word was by looking for a space. So we know any word is preceded by a space. So I can look for a space before my character, and that's what I'm going to do. But what is important to keep in mind is that the first character here actually does not have a space before it. So you'll see in my solution how I accommodated for that. It's important for you, if you do this question, that you also have a sentence that contains well, start your sentence with a vowel, just to see if the vowel is still displaying here at the bottom, because that's something I know people often get wrong. And also take careful note if your O and U are both deleting, and I'm going to explain what could go wrong if it's not deleting with a first click. Okay, so we're storing our sentence from the user, and to keep that first S, or if it was an A, if it was an A, for example, to keep that first character, to ensure that it's there, I am initializing my new string that I'm going to build without vowels. I'm initializing that to the first character of my sentence. And now I'm going to loop not from 1, but from 2 to the length. So if okay, so this is looping through the rest of the sentence. And what I'm testing here is the character before the character I'm at. Is that a space? So let's say we take this input again of space travel. I am at T at this point, and now I'm seeing, is the character before T a space? If it is, then I just add the character, regardless of whether it is a vowel or not. If it's not a space, it means I'm somewhere in the middle of a word, and then I have to test if the character is not a vowel. Now, this code here is very important. I'm just going to quickly go over our in operator and how to use your not. Let's just first look at the in operator. I want to ensure that both lowercase and capital letters would be found. And that is why I'm using uppercase around my character. You can see the blue brackets here. Uppercase around this character here. Now, you can't use uppercase because then it won't be compatible any longer with your in operator, because you're changing the data type to a string. And what we need to remember about an in operator is that it can only use ordinal values. So my in operator doesn't have an equal sign or anything in there. It's just in and then square brackets. Remember when we're doing SQL, we use the round brackets within, but when we're using normal Delphi, we're going to use square brackets. And then you have to list your characters, make sure that there is an inverted comma around each character, because if you leave it out, I'm just going to change the first two there. Now you're creating a string again. And remember, our in can only use chars. So make sure that each character has its own set of quotes. Now, I want to add characters, but not if they are vowels. So I'm placing a not here in the front. And what is important with the not is, you see the blue brackets highlighting now, you have to put your condition inside of the not in these round brackets. So a not always works with a round bracket and then your condition on the inside here. So there's my condition, all inside of the not brackets. So if it's not a vowel and it's not the first letter of the sentence, I'm going to add this character. If it's the first letter of the of a word, I'll be adding the character here. And so we'll loop right through to the end. Now, what I want to show you guys, let's say I had the word through here, and I was looping now through my sentence. No pun intended. And you guys sometimes use the delete procedure to delete a sentence. Now, I want to show you why you can't do that. So let's, you're looping through all of this. You've added the THR, and now your K is full. Okay, so now you see, oh, okay, I should be removing the O. And then you guys inside of your for loop, you use a delete. So what you're doing is you are changing a sentence to that. Okay, remember K was 4 now. When I loop again, my K is changed to 5. And that means I'm going to G. And in this way, you have skipped over the U. So it would work for a sentence where there aren't. So in your case, if you look at the word young and you run your program for the example of input, you'll see that only the O will be deleted, but the U will stay there. If you click it on a second time, then only will the U be deleted. So it's important that you never change anything in your heading of your for loop. You can't change, well, Delphi will allow you to change it, so it won't give you an error, but you're not going to get the right output because you're going to skip over characters. You can't change the K either, but Delphi does indicate that with a syntax error for you. So just a little recap there on delete and some string handling. This is a question that is often asked to remove or found vowels. Okay, so let's have a look at the next question. So this was quite a lengthy question. Basically, there was this exhibition and there was space for 100 people. And the question is asking us to use an input box to ask the user for the number of people. And it says that the user must continue to enter the number of people. So they're entering groups of people at a time. And you are going to continue to add groups of people until the attendees reaches 100. But before you add a group, you have to test if there's space for that group. And if there's not space for them, then you will display a message, but the user should still be able to add more values for new groups. But you have to be careful not to count this group that does not fit into, that does not fit for adding it and going over 100. So it exceeds the number of seats available. So if we have a look here, the screenshot is actually easier if you guys, I don't want to sit here and read the whole question to you. The first group have 27 entered, and then you have these headings that you have to display, and you have to count the group numbers. So 1 and then 2. So 27 first and then 34. And then if the next group wants to add 50 people now, there won't be space for them because that would exceed the 100. Then this message must be displayed to say the number of seats available is 39. Now, what you should be doing when you're running this program is input the 24 and the 34 and the 50, but then I want you to add, let's say, a value of 20, and you should see then a group number of 3, and then your 20 number of people. And then when you when you enter 19 the next time, then the group 4, and then your loop should stop, because then you've reached 100. So the problem here with the screenshots that we have is it does not actually show exactly what the question wants after this. And some people did count the number of groups even though they didn't fit. So first of all, let's just quickly go through tab stops. Before we do that, take note of the constant given. They have given you the constant iSeats available, which is set to 100. And then what we need to do is we need to set some tab stops. Because I'm displaying an integer number here, it's going, my next tab, if I use #9, is going to sit there under number. And I want to have these neat columns. So it's a clear indication that I'm going to have to set up tab stops. And just to help you, what I usually do is I create my heading first. And then I just count my number of #9s that I need. And that is your number of tab stops. And that is what you need to set your tab count to. So tab count is equal to 1 because I've only used one #9. If you use two #9s, that would be 2. And then the next lines, you need to match that. So I have one tab stop. So I need to have one tab here with square brackets and 0 in the middle. And as a hint, for numbers, I use the value 50. And for strings that are longer values like that, I use the value 100. And that usually helps me to work out where my tabs need to stop. You know that the first tab will always be the smallest. So tab 0 will be your smallest one. And if you had more tab stops here, every one that follows has to have a higher number than the first one, because your tab stops are always measured from the left of your rich edit. And important that, like in this example where we have a dot clear, that you first have your dot clear before you set your tab stops, else you clear your tab stops as well. So careful not to put that clear there. Okay, but let's get to the actual question. That was just revision on tab stops if needed. Remember about the constant seats. And for my first solution here, I have used a while loop. So iTotal is going to keep track of the number of people that is allowed in. And iSeats available is my constant that won't be changing, or it can't change also. iCount is going to count my groups that are allowed. And in my while loop, I'm going to continue to loop while my total is less than 100. Now, there'll be specific marks for using your constant, so make sure you use it. You can now see my total is the variable that I'm initializing, testing, and now I must make sure that it changes on the inside of my while loop. We're now getting input from the user from an input box, and this is where I usually put in there the default value of my input box. I always put the value of the first screenshot in there just to help me speed up the testing of my program, especially when you are stressed in an exam. You want to save as much time as you can. So that is the input for the person stored in iPeople. And what I'm going to do before I add iPeople to iTotal, that's very important. I first want to see if this group of people will fit and not exceed 100. So I'm taking the number of people entered and I'm adding it in my if statement. I'm adding it to the total and I'm testing if it's less or equal to 100. It can go up to 100, but not higher than 100. And if this was possible, then I would add the number of people to my running total, iTotal, and only then do I count this group. Careful not to count the group up here, because then you will count the invalid groups as well, the groups that didn't fit. So here I am displaying my counter, and I'm also displaying the number of people for this entry. If they didn't fit, I then have to calculate how many seats are available. And that is my calculation using my constant and deducting from that this total that I have up to now. And then displaying a message. Remember, there was an enter. So make sure that you use the #10 there to create the enter. And then you had to show how many are left. Just as a note, whenever you have input from the user in a loop, whether it is a conditional loop or a for loop, you will also always use an input box, since the user can't make changes to any object on your form while the loop is running. So input from the user inside of a loop will always be in the form of an input box. So here's my initialize, test, and then changing of the same variable for ITC for my while loop. But here is an example for you guys. If you want to use the repeat loop, here's the same code. So iTotal is at the top. I have my counter, input. All of this still looks the same. The only thing that is changing here is that I'm looping until the total seats is equal to the seats available, because the question said we have to continue to loop until the 100 was filled. So that is why I have an equal sign here. So our while loop says while something is true loop, and our repeat loop says execute all of this until something is true. And that's really the difference between the two. So just to quickly go to Shawns' question, he wanted to know how we write, overwrite information in a text file. I'll find it for you guys in one of my books quickly. So it should be here under text files. I just have to find it, writing to a text file. And let me get to the code. So this is the code that we would use to either clear, remove the content from the original file and replace it with new content, or we might want to add onto it. So if we are going to, let's say I have to write these values to a text file, but I want to create the text file if it doesn't yet exist, I will use the rewrite. So that would create the file for me called names.txt. If I click on this button again and the file already now exists, so that if statement, if file exists, is not true, that would be false. It will then go to append, and that will add to the end. Now, I guess, Shawn, you are asking, what are we going to do if we want to clear that text file every time I click on this button? Very simple. You'll leave out your if statement and your else and your append. So you'll just have assign file and rewrite file, and the rest still stays the same. But no, you won't test if it exists to add to the end. So you won't have your else and your append. Append will allow you to add to the bottom of the file. I hope, Shawn, that answered your question. So we have a few minutes for some theory questions here. These also come from, these are still from that past paper, the final of 2018. So I want to ask you guys, I have just compared the two loop structures for me. I want you to tell me what is the minimum number of times, you guys can answer in the chat. What are the minimum number of times that a while loop will execute? So just type in the number, the minimum number of times that a while loop will execute. The question in this paper, which would be hard for you guys to answer now, is to compare the two. As I said before, with our while loop, we have the condition at the top, and we will test while something is true. And the repeat loop, we will repeat until something is true. So yes, Skalk, you are correct. The minimum number of times that a while loop executes is 0, because if the condition isn't met the first time it runs, it does not execute at all. What is the minimum number of times that a repeat loop will execute? You can just type in the number. So we say repeat until. A question often asked us, yes, Gok, that is correct. Simangalisu, 1 is also correct for a repeat loop. So we have repeat until. This code between the repeat until will execute at least once because your condition now sits at the bottom. So yeah, I think that's the repeat loop will execute at least once. The question papers often ask you, continue to ask the user for input. Now that would be a brilliant place to use a repeat loop. Let's say we were checking for valid input. Your repeat loop will be the perfect place to use it because you will need to run that code at least once. You need to have input from the user at least once. Okay, so let's look at the following question. I need the answer of X there. So what is the answer? The data type. Sorry, not the answer. Answer or data type. Let's get both. Give me the data type and the answer of X. So X is assigned to 5 mod 2. What would be my data type and my answer? Okay, so my data type is integer, yes, Shawn, but my answer isn't 20. My answer is 1. So it is an integer data type. And the answer, remember, mod gives me the remainder. So if I say 5 mod 2, it means when I divide 5 by 2, what is the remainder? You see, these questions are the ones that you guys need to practice. There is absolutely no other way of studying for this part of the exam. Okay, the next question, Y. What is the data type of Y and what is its value? I have shown this before. It's Boolean, Skulk, yes, and it's false. Remember I showed you guys before in one of our OOP questions that you can put the condition here on the right and that the condition here, so Y would be Boolean, and I am testing if 5 mod 2 is 0. And we just said that 5 mod 2 is 1, so this will be false. So Y is a Boolean value and it is false. If I'm reading from a text file, and there's many reasons, but let's get a couple of reasons here. I'm reading from a text file. Why am I getting this error, input output error? Actually, on the next slide, I have lots of reasons for you guys. If I can just have some from you, there are multiple correct answers. You often get this when you are reading from a text file and you're doing something wrong. So what could possibly be wrong? Don't worry, you don't have to write full sentences. You can just type in a sentence that makes some sense. So I'm reading from the text file and my program crashes. It's a runtime error and I'm getting an input-output error. Yes, close file inside of the loop, that is correct. The file does not exist. Perfect, Shawn. You guys are on the right track. So I'm not going to wait for more answers. There are lots of answers here. The file's not closed during the previous procedure. So let's say you were reading from the file somewhere and now you are writing to it in a later procedure, but you forgot to close the file where you were reading from it. So it's still open. Or the file was not correctly assigned. So you have the wrong name of the file in assign file. Append or rewrite was used to open the file. So instead of, you want to read line, but now you're using append or rewrite. Maybe your write line statement, you guys often forget to put the T file in the front and just put S line. That could cause it. And then maybe the file is not in the same folder as where the program is running, and the file might be closed. So as you can see, these are reasons that I don't think are in any textbook and would best be studied by taking past papers and making yourself notes and studying from those notes using past papers. Okay, so just an explanation of these are also questions from theory papers where you have to explain the purpose of a sign file. and then also explaining the difference between append and rewrite. So assign file creates a link from the file that is stored on your disk to a variable. And you guys need to make sure that you go and study these definitions. Get them from past theory papers from the memos and study them. And then the difference between append and rewrite is append will add to the end, but if we replace append with rewrite, the file content will be emptied. So Shawn, that is actually what you want to do, is we want to empty the content and we want to write it over it with new content. Okay, we only have 5 minutes left. So I am quickly going to explain very important trace tables. You are most likely going to get a trace table. So important that you know how to do them. They usually give you the headings here at the top, and they also give you some input. So this question gave us the input 623. The value of X was 623, because you'll see on line 3 here, X gets the value of the pin, and the pin was given as 623, and C has the value of 0. They could have asked you to complete that as well, but that was part of what was given. And then we have a repeat loop, and we have to basically explain what's going on in the RAM. So what I'm doing here is in line 5, X gets the value. So I'm going to stay in column X. X gets the value of what X was. X was 623 divided by 10. So that is why I now have 62.3, because I divided X by 10. So my next value now of X is 62,3. In my next line, line 6, I'm incrementing C. So C was 0, and now C is 1. The next line that executes is here in my until, and I'm testing if X, so 62,3, is it less than 1? So wherever you have a condition, you're going to place a true or a false. And obviously 62,3 is not less than 1, so that's why I have a false here in this column. So the next line that executes is not line 8. I will go back up and line 5 will execute again, and that I have to indicate in my trace table. So if we have a look at this, we were at 62,3. X now gets a value where I take 62,3 and I divide it by 10 again, and this is 6,23. Then C is incremented again, it changes to 2. I test again, is 6,23 less than 1? No, not yet. So I store false. My next line that executes is 5 again. And then I divide that value again by 2 to get 0.623. I add 1 to the C, and then I have at the bottom here to test if the value of X is less than 1, and that is true. So now only does line 8 execute. So I'm testing here if C is not equal to 5, which is true, and now I'm going to display error in pin. Now I want to know from you guys, can you figure out, we don't have a lot of time left, what was the aim of this program? So that is often asked. So you can complete my statement to say, this is to validate that the pin is, and you can complete the rest of that sentence, because we are validating my pin, and I'm validating that my pin is, and then you guys complete the sentence. So we often given these algorithms to complete trace tables with. Yes, Gog, that is correct. It is testing. It's an interesting way of testing. I would have done it differently. So, but it is a good exercise to use a trace table with. But it's testing if the pin is valid, and only valid pins have to have exactly 5 digits. If you keep the, if you are keeping your number X as an integer, yes, then you would have to divide by 10 to work out how many digits it has. And then, but if you stored X as a string, you could have just used length. But this was a good way of asking a trace table. The other way that trace tables are asked is they give you code with an error in it. And then you ask to draw up the trace table. And then your trace table will then find the error for you. That's actually what we use trace tables for. And then you will ask in a second question, they could then ask you, how to fix it or why did the error occur. In this case, they gave us a working program and then asked us so draw up this trace table for a working program. And then they asked us after that, what was the aim of the program? They could also, so those are the two scenarios for trace table. The third scenario is to just actually do a trace table. So that is basically our time for today. Thank you guys for watching. I just need to make sure that I now go to the right slide. So when I see you guys again, we will go to, let me just make sure it's shared. When I see you guys again, we'll look at question 2, which is an OOP question. Nice long one, because remember, this is only a 3-question paper. So that would be on Monday. I'm not 100% sure. Maybe our host can tell us if our links are changing for next week. I'm not sure if the links are changing, but you guys got hold of the links for this week. So I'm sure you'll be able to get them again next week. So try that OOP question. Very good practice since it's a longer one. And then I'll see you guys on Monday with some extra theory questions as well. I think it's important to go through those question 4s and 5s. So guys, thank you very much for watching grade 12 IT at STEM Lockdown Digital School. I just want to ask before I say goodbye if Chili Boy is here today. I don't see him here today. Okay. Thank you very much for watching. And we'll see you on Monday. Follow, yes.
Sorry to interrupt. I haven't heard anything and I haven't seen a new schedule yet. So I am actually not sure.
Okay.
I doubt if the links will change.
Okay.
But I am not sure. So rather check back into African Teen Geeks on Sunday afternoon, maybe.
Okay, great.
Or the newsletter, actually.
Okay, great, guys. I hope you all have the newsletter. You can enroll on the website for it. So you just search for Africa Teen Geeks and then also follow them on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And you'll find the YouTubes and the grade 12 IT playlist under their channel, Africa Teen Geeks. See you guys on Monday. Have an awesome weekend. Bye.